What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and the fight gloves, they are on. UFC on Fox 7 takes place this weekend, headlined by a battle to determine the one true lightweight champion of the world, as longtime StrikeForce lightweight champion Gilbert El Nino Melendez makes his UFC debut, stepping right to the plate to take on UFC lightweight champion Benson Henderson. But before we get to that fight, we actually have an excellent card here. We have got guys making anticipated UFC debuts. We've got a pretty damn good undercard here. We've got veterans of the sport. We've got young guns, and one young gun as the nickname, Jordan Mean. So let's get to this fight card. It is going to be a great night of fights, and let's talk about them. We have an 8-fight preliminary card here, so we're going to start with the 2 fights that will be featured on the Facebook prelims. Starting in the middleweight division, we have Clifford Starks taking on Yoel Romero. Now, Clifford Starks is 8-1 on his pro career, an even record of 1-1 in the UFC, was submitted in his last fight by Ed Shortfuse Herman. Now, 4 of Starks' 8 professional wins have been decisions. He's also got 3 knockouts on his record. He's a veteran of Rage in the Cage, a former teammate of Cain Velasquez's at the University of Arizona State. Clifford Starks is a wrestle boxer basically, but he's also got some good Muay Thai striking. Yoel Romero, 4-1 on his pro career, making his UFC debut, lost his only outing in StrikeForce, being knocked out in his last fight by Feijão Cavalcante. Now, all 5 of Romero's professional fights have ended in either a knockout or a TKO, but he is an Olympic-level freestyle wrestler. As a matter of fact, at the 2000 Olympic Games, he won a silver medal at the 84-kilogram weight class, which is right around middleweight of 185 pounds. Probably going to be a close fight. I really want to see how Romero's wrestling game translates into the UFC cage. Didn't really get to see a whole lot when Feijão knocked his block off, but I'm going to probably take Clifford Starks here, the more experienced mixed martial artist, the more well-rounded mixed martial artist. I'll take Clifford Starks by way of a unanimous judge's decision. In the lightweight division, we have Anthony Njokuani taking on Roger Bowling. Anthony Njokuani, 15-7-1 on his pro career, but a losing record of 2-3 inside the octagon, was decisioned in his last fight by Rafael dos Anjos. 8 of his 15 professional wins have been knockouts. He has 7 decisions to go along with those knockouts. His last 3 losses, however, have all come by way of decision. He's a well-rounded fighter, but he's kind of unspectacular in his numbers anyway. He's only got about a 47% striking accuracy, so only about 50-50 there. He does avoid 69% of incoming strikes, which is a very good number. But his takedown offense and takedown defense, very pedestrian really to me, at 56 and 59% respectively. Now, Roger Bowling, 11-3 on his pro career, making his UFC debut, had a winning record of 4-3 in StrikeForce, was decisioned in his last fight by Tarek Saffiedine. Now, 7 of Bowling's 11 professional wins have come by way of knockout. 2 of his 3 professional losses have also come by way of knockout. Roger Bowling's probably best known for his StrikeForce Challengers trilogy of fights with Bobby Volker. He's a freestyle fighter. He looks for takedowns, and he looks for ground and pound. And I actually think he's going to be able to catch Njokuani in this. I don't expect to see a whole lot of octagon jitters from Roger Bowling. I'm going to take Bowling to beat Njokuani by way of first round knockout or TKO. Next, we have a bantamweight clash between TJ Dillashaw and Hugo Viana. Now, TJ Dillashaw, 7-1 on his pro career, a very good record of 3-1 in the UFC. Currently riding a 3-fight win streak, which includes a knockout win of Issei Tamura, a submission of Vaughn Lee, and a decision win over Wallel Watson. He's got a pretty even win distribution on his career, 2 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 2 decisions. TJ Dillashaw is ground and pound for days, but he also trains with Team Alpha Male, so you cannot avoid those chokes that come from Team Alpha Male fighters. Hugo Viana, an undefeated 7-0 in his pro career, has won both of his UFC octagon endeavors. He knocked out Ruben Duran in his last fight. 6 of his 7 professional wins have been decisions. He is a Taekwondo black belt as well as a blue belt in BJJ. He's got great takedown defense, above 80%. He likes to keep the fight standing, likes to stand and bang, but to me he is a volume striker that's got debatable power. far as I'm concerned, this is TJ Dillashaw's fight to lose. I've got Dillashaw all the way here. I think Viana's going to make it interesting, but I've got TJ Dillashaw to beat Hugo Viana by third round knockout or TKO. Back to the lightweight division, we have Tim Means taking on George Masvidal. Now, Tim Means, 18-3-1 on his professional career. He is 2-0 in the UFC, currently riding an 11-fight unbeaten streak. A very good streak here for Tim Means. This includes a TKO win over Justin Salas and a unanimous decision victory over Bernardo Magalhães in the UFC. Now, 13 of Means' 18 pro wins have been knockouts, but he has been finished in all 3 of his losses, submitted twice and knocked out once. He has never been taken down in his UFC career, and that is something I think that should be highlighted. Never been taken down in the UFC, and Tim Means' game is striking from everywhere. Stand-up striking, clinch striking, and striking on the ground. George Masvidal is the more experienced of the 2 fighters, Masvidal having a 23-7 professional MMA record. He's making his UFC debut, but he was 5-1 in StrikeForce. He decisioned Justin Wilcox in his last fight. George Masvidal is the former #1 contender for the StrikeForce lightweight title, of course losing that title fight to Gilbert Melendez, who we're going to hear from a little bit later. He has also fought in Sengoku, and he's also fought in Bellator. He lives and dies on outstriking his opponents, but at the same time, he's also got very good takedowns that Tim Means is going to have to watch for. To be perfectly honest, I consider this kind of like the last fight. I think this is Tim Means' fight to lose. He's a very talented fighter. I've been very impressed by what I've seen from Tim Means lately, so I'm going to give him the edge here. I'm going to take Tim Means to beat George Masvidal by unanimous judges' decision. Still on the prelim card, we have Joseph Benavidez taking on Darren Uwanayama in the flyweight division. The winner of this fight could very well see themselves step into the next in line for a flyweight title fight. Joseph Benavidez, 17-3 on his pro career. He is 4-1 in the UFC. He decisioned Uncle Creepy Ian McCall in his last fight. He is a top-tier flyweight and has been so in both the UFC as well as the WEC beforehand. Benavidez has great conditioning, he cuts a great fight pace, and he's a very well-rounded fighter. 12 of his 17 pro wins have been finishes. He's got 4 knockouts and 8 submissions, and he slips about 2/3 of incoming strikes, so he's also a very evasive fighter, sometimes very hard to catch up with. Now, Darren Uwanayama, 8-3 on his pro career, has won both of his octagon fights, currently riding a 3-fight win streak, including a submission win over Phil Harris and a decision over Norifumi Kid Yamamoto in the UFC. Now, 4 of his 8 professional wins have been submissions. He is a grappler. He's got excellent takedowns. He is a volume ground and pound striker when the fight hits the ground. And he's also dangerous just in the grappling on the ground from both the top and the bottom. So Uwanayama, a very well-rounded fighter, is very dangerous wherever the fight goes. Ladies and gentlemen, it's upset time. I feel it in my bones. I picked the favorite Tim Means, and I picked the favorite TJ Dillashaw. I'm going with the underdog here. I'm actually going to take Darren Uwanayama to catch Joseph Benavidez in one of those scrambles on the ground, and I actually think Darren Uwanayama finishes Joseph Benavidez by submission in the second round. Write it down. Get out to the bookie. Darren Uwanayama upsets Joseph Benavidez. Back to the lightweight division and a battle between Ramsey Nijem and Myles Jury. Ramsey Nijem is 7-2 on his pro career, 3-1 inside the UFC, currently riding a 3-fight win streak, including a decision win over Joe Proctor, a TKO of CJ Keith, and a decision win over Danny Downs, none of which are easy opponents. He has been finished, however, in both of his career losses, being knocked out once and submitted once as well. Ramsey Nijem is one of these guys that just finds ways to win. It doesn't matter how he has to do it. He's got 2 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 3 decisions. He is a grinding fighter. Volume takedowns. He's going to be pushing and shooting for takedowns almost throughout the entirety of the fight. Nijem is a guy that finds ways to win fights. He makes it dirty if he has to. Myles Jury, 11-0 in his pro career, of course, has won his 2 octagon fights. He decisioned Michael Johnson in his last fight. He had finished every single one of his opponents prior to the fight with Michael Johnson. He's extremely good at avoiding strikes. Myles Jury wants the fight on the ground, has very, very strong ground and pound. I think this is a fight that hits the ground early and hits the ground often. And between these two guys, I can honestly see Myles Jury catching Ramsey Nijem. I know Nijem has a good chin, but I just think there's something about this Myles Jury kid, and I think he's going to go over on a guy who is a name fighter here in Ramsey Nijem. People know who Nijem is. I'm going to take Myles Jury to beat Ramsey Nijem by way of first round knockout or TKO. Up next, we have a battle in the middleweight division and a guy that is very quickly becoming one of my favorite fighters, Francis Carmont, taking on Lorenz Larkin. Now, Francis Carmont, 20-7 on his pro career, an undefeated 4-0 in the UFC, currently riding a 9-fight win streak. That includes decision wins over Tom Lawler and Chris Camozzi, a submission of Carlos Vamola, and a submission of Magnus Sedenblad inside the UFC octagon. 16 of his 20 wins have been finishes. He's got 6 knockouts and 10 submissions, so he's well-rounded there. 4-3 when the fight goes the distance. Francis Carmont is a 60% striker, and he strikes from everywhere. He strikes from the clinch, he strikes standing up, and he strikes on the ground. Also has an excellent takedown defense of above 85% in the UFC. So Carmont, in my opinion, very well-rounded fighter, underrated fighter, one of the dangerous fighters in the middleweight division. Carmont taking on the debuting Lorenz Larkin. Larkin 13-0-1 on his pro career, obviously making his UFC debut, was 4-0-1 in 5 StrikeForce fights. His last 3 wins have all come by way of decision after 7 straight knockout or TKO victories heading in, so it's not like Lorenz Larkin doesn't have power and technique in his own right. He was knocked out by King Mo January 2012. That was, of course, overturned to a no contest after King Mo was tested positive for something or other. He is 5-0, this is Lorenz Larkin, 5-0 when the fight goes the distance. I'm going to have to be a sucker and take the favorite here again. I'm very high on Francis Carmont. Lorenz Larkin is a legit opponent for Carmont, but I think Carmont gets the better of him. I'm going to take Francis Carmont to beat Lorenz Larkin by way of second round knockout or TKO. And now on to what I consider to be the main event of the preliminary card, featherweight division, Chad Mendes taking on Darren Elkins. Chad Mendes, 13-1 on his pro career, 4-1 in the UFC. Has got 2 straight knockout wins over Yeltsin Meza and Cody McKenzie. Former #1 contender for the featherweight title, of course losing that title fight to Jose Aldo, which so does everybody. 7 of his 13 professional wins have been decisions. He is a Div 1 wrestling pedigree, very, very aggressive with his takedowns, and is notoriously hard to take down in his own right, which I think is going to be a problem for a guy like Darren Elkins, who has very strong ground and pound, as we'll talk about right now. Darren Elkins, 16-2 on his pro career, 6-1 in the UFC, so more UFC experience and an excellent record. He is currently riding a 5-fight win streak. TKO over Antonio Carvalho, in his last fight, and 4 decisions in a row prior to that over Steven Seiler, Diego Brandao, Tia Trinzong, and Michihiro Omigawa. So he's beating legitimate high-level opponents there. Elkins is 6-0 if the fight goes the distance. 10 of his 16 pro wins have been finishes, got 7 knockouts and 3 submissions. Elkins has good stand-up. I shouldn't just paint him as nothing but a ground and pound guy. He does have good stand-up. I think his bread and butter is the ground and pound. I have to wonder if he's going to be able to get Chad Mendes to the ground. I'm going to have to bet that he doesn't. If he does, stands a good chance of potentially finishing the fight. I'm going to take Chad Mendes, though, to beat Darren Elkins by way of knockout or technical knockout inside the very first round. And if you thought that was good, wait till you hear this main card. On to the main card now. Welterweight division, arguably the most competitive division in MMA. We have Matt Brown taking on Jordan Young Gun Meehan. Now Matt Brown, 16-11 on his pro career, enjoying something of a career renaissance lately. 9-5 in the UFC, riding a 4-fight win streak. Knockout or TKO wins over Mike Swick, Luis Ramos, and Chris Cope, as well as a decision win over Stephen Thompson. Now 9 of his 11 professional losses have come by way of submission, so he's really got to worry about people with a very strong grappling pedigree. 14 of his 16 professional wins have been finishes. He's got 9 knockouts and 5 submissions. Brown belt in judo, purple belt in BJJ, Matt Brown is a very dangerous clinch striker, and that's something that Jordan Meehan is really going to have to watch out for, because Brown can be devastating when he gets you in the clinch. Jordan Meehan, 27-8 on his pro career, winning his UFC debut and riding a 3-fight win streak. That win streak, of course, includes his TKO of Dan Miller in his UFC debut. 22 of his 27 wins have been finishes. He's got 15 knockouts and 7 submissions. He has also been finished in 5 of his 8 losses, being submitted 4 of those 5 times. He is 5-3 when the fight goes the distance. Jordan Meehan owns 18 first-round stoppages. Jordan Meehan really impressed me in his debut fight, and, you know, he's a Canadian boy. He's a really good fighter. I think I got to go with him. I know Matt Brown is really streaking right now, and I've been being burnt by picking against Matt Brown, just assuming this wave is kind of going to end. Well, this is 2 waves that's going to hit each other. I just think Jordan Meehan's wave is going to be a little bit stronger. So I'm going to take Jordan Meehan to beat Matt Brown by way of unanimous judges' decision. In the lightweight division, we have former top contender Nate Diaz taking on former StrikeForce top contender Josh Thompson. Nate Diaz, 16-8 on his pro career, an 11-6 record in the UFC, was decisioned in his last fight by, of course, Benson Henderson for the lightweight title, which snapped a 3-fight win streak for Nate Diaz. 11 of his 16 professional wins have been by submissions, but 7 of his 8 losses have come by a decision, so the fight goes the distance hasn't been too kind to Nate. He is constantly dangerous on the ground. The Cesar Gracie Jiu-Jitsu guys, always dangerous on the ground, and he's dangerous standing up. He's like his brother Nick. He's a volume puncher. Striking from the standing positions as well as from the clinch. He's got very good clinch striking, and of course, excellent submission game possessed by Nate Diaz. Josh Thompson, 19-5-1 on his pro career. He is 2-1 from a very early stint in the UFC, was decisioned by Gilbert Melendez in a StrikeForce lightweight title fight in his previous outing. 13 of his 19 wins have been finishes. He's got 4 knockouts and 9 submissions, so a good submission artist in his own right. Josh Thompson is 6-4 when the fight goes the distance. He is a BJJ black belt, trains with American Kickboxing Academy. His game is going to be to press with his wrestling, press with takedowns, and to try to utilize a solid submission game. That being said, I don't know exactly how you work a solid submission game with a Diaz brother, and I think Thompson's going to try to take this into Nate's wheelhouse, and that's going to be a major problem for him. So I'm going to take Nate Diaz to beat Josh Thompson by way of, you guessed it, submission in the 3rd round. Co-main event time, and it's the big boys. Heavyweight division, we have Frank Mir taking on the finally debuting former StrikeForce heavyweight champion, Daniel Cormier. Frank Mir is 16-6 on his pro career, 14-6 in the UFC, so all but 2 of his pro fights have taken place in the octagon. He was TKO'd in his last fight by Junior Dos Santos. That was, of course, a heavyweight title fight. All 6 of Frank Mir's career losses have come by way of knockout or TKO, but 12 of his 16 wins have been finishes. He's got 3 knockouts in his own right, also got 9 submissions, and I think he's often unfairly typecast as just a wrestler, and that's not what Frank Mir is. He is a grappler. Has much improved striking really from all areas. His clinch striking looks much better, his stand-up looks much better, and his ground and pound, which was already fairly good, I feel is much better now as well. He's a very active fighter when the fight hits the ground. Daniel Cormier, an undefeated 11-0, making his UFC debut, was of course victorious in all 6 of his StrikeForce outings. He TKO'd Dion Staring in his last fight. Now, 8 of his 11 pro wins have been finishes. He's got 5 knockouts and 3 submissions, but at least 2 of those submissions were due to strikes. He has notable wins on his career over Jeff Monson, Bigfoot Silva, as well as Josh Barnett. He is a Div 1 wrestler, very active striking when the fight hits the ground. What I worry about with Daniel Cormier is I worry about his gas tank, because he was not, to me, he wasn't all overly impressive in the Dion Staring fight until he finally finished it. So I worry about his gas tank. I also worry about his submission defense, because if this fight hits the ground, Frank Mir is going to be going for something, and Frank Mir is a damn talented grappler. I honestly think Frank Mir wins this fight. I don't think he finishes Cormier. I think Cormier is probably good enough to survive the 3 rounds, but I'm going to take Frank Mir to beat up Daniel Cormier and beat him by unanimous judges' decision. Main event time, ladies and gentlemen. 5 rounds for the undisputed lightweight championship. UFC lightweight champion Benson Henderson defends the title against former StrikeForce lightweight champion coming over to essentially unify the titles, El Nino Gilbert Melendez. Ben Henderson, 18-2 on his pro career, just an amazing record. Undefeated 6-0 in the UFC, currently riding a 6-decision win streak. Nate Diaz, twice against Frankie Edgar, Clay Guida, Jim Miller, as well as Mark Bocek. So it's just the top of the lightweight division here. But 10 of his 18 pro wins have been finished as he's got 2 knockouts and 8 submissions. So Ben Henderson does have a very solid submission game. He's just now more akin to quote-unquote safe fighting. He is a very evasive fighter. 63% of incoming strikes avoided and a 67% takedown defense. So he is very good at staying away from whatever his opponent is trying to do from him. Now, El Nino Gilbert Melendez, 21-2 on his pro career, making his UFC debut, but has a phenomenal 11-1 record in StrikeForce. He's currently riding a 7-fight win streak. Of course, former StrikeForce lightweight champion. 11 of his 21 wins have come by way of knockout, and he's 9-2 when the fight goes a distance, so he can really win from anywhere. He has extremely good ground and pound and a very good ground transition game, and the thing about Melendez is on his career, it's been cardio for days, cardio. Can he out-cardio Ben Henderson? I don't know. Can he avoid Ben Henderson taking him down? I don't know. And can he take Ben Henderson down himself? Another thing, I really don't know. To me, there's too many question marks here on Gilbert Melendez's side. For the longest time, I called Gil Melendez probably the best lightweight on the planet, but I think I gotta go with Ben Henderson. I went against him in the Nate Diaz fight, and I knew that was against my better judgment, and Ben proved me right. So I'm gonna take Ben Henderson to beat Gilbert Melendez by, you guessed it, unanimous judges' decision. So there it is, folks, a 12-fight card, and we're gonna go over my predictions here with you one more time. Starting on the prelim card, the 2 Facebook prelim fights. At the middleweight division, I have Clifford Starks beating Yoel Romero by way of unanimous judges' decision. And at the lightweight division, I have Roger Bowling beating Anthony Njokuani, something of an upset, by first round knockout or TKO. On the main prelim card, bantamweight division, I have TJ Dillashaw beating Hugo Viana by way of third round knockout or TKO. At the lightweight division, I have Tim Means with a decision victory over George Masvidal. Flyweight division, I have Darren Uwanayama upsetting Joseph Benavidez by way of second round submission. Lightweight division, I have Miles Jury beating Ramsey Nijem by first round knockout or TKO. Middleweight division, I have Francis Carmon by way of murder beating Lorenz Larkin by second round knockout or TKO. And the main event of the prelim cards, I have Chad Mendes in the featherweight division beating Darren Elkins, by way of first round knockout or TKO. Main card, welterweight division, I have Jordan Young Gun Meehan upsetting Matt Brown by way of unanimous judges' decision. At the lightweight division, I have Nate Diaz with a third round submission victory over Josh Thompson. Heavyweight division, I have Frank Mir derailing the hype train of Daniel Cormier, beating him by unanimous judges' decision. And the main event of the evening, 5 rounds for the lightweight title, I have Benson Henderson defending the lightweight title by beating Gilbert Melendez by way of unanimous judges' decision. Those are my fight picks. UFC on Fox 7 this weekend. Want to hear your fight predictions in the comments section below. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. I'm gone.